D-Money, welcome back, brother. It's so good to see you. Crazy season. It's like we just got done, and it's February, and it's finally over. Sadly, the Hurricanes came up a little bit short, but man, it was such a fun ride, such a magical ride. And I've probably asked your opinion about this at this vantage point before, but again, you do such a great job covering the Canes. You're always so professional, and do a good job. But I want to hear it from
Do you
D-Money the
watch the
kid.
show, by the way, when you say that? I'm always so professional. That's the first
Yeah,
time
tune in.
anyone's
I
ever
saw you
said
talking
that.
about tight ends earlier today. So we're locked and loaded. But I do want to hear, just as the kid growing up, loving Miami, the young D Money, what was this like, man? Traveling around the country and then ending up walking to the stadium to watch a national championship.
You're still young, D-Money, by the way. I don't know what
No, he's
Max
not.
talking
He's
about.
old. This dude's old. I found that out.
I'm 40. I'm a man. But yeah, no, it was awesome. My kids were shocked at how not mad I was leaving Hard Rock Stadium. They're 11, 9. They're like, how are you not mad? Like, and the truth was, when you live the past 23 years as a fan, talking about like the lowest of the lows, I mean, you could not get lower than some of the stuff that Miami went through. We're talking about, deaths in the program, obviously some just terrible bowl performances and on-field performances, and just not a lot of peaks and valleys. It was mostly valleys. So after all of that, to get to that moment, and it was a classic game, watching it, you kind of felt, especially when Miami got the ball on the last drive, like, man, people must be loving this on TV, which it turns out, 33 million people watching it, biggest sporting event since, besides the NFL, since the Cubs winning the World Series in 2016. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. So to me, it was honestly just gratitude for being able to be there. All the games, of course, on the way up were awesome, and the wins, but even just the championship game, which should have been demoralizing, was actually, to me, uplifting, because it was such a big deal and it was such a fun game for everybody to watch. Even though you come up short, I didn't think it was like Ohio State, where you thought you lost to a team that wasn't as good as you, and you had injuries and you had bad calls and all that kind of stuff. This, to me, we're talking about 2002 Ohio State. This, to me, was much more of just, hey, you ran into a team that executed better that day. They deserve to win that game. You got to go back and try to improve. But ultimately, it was an incredible ride, and even the last game was quite an awesome experience.
Did you know Ingalls only sells USDA choice and prime cuts of meat? Maybe it's time to reward yourself. Our butchers cut all our meat fresh in the store every day. Grass-fed, organic, you name it. Not only that, we'll even cut it to order just the way you like it. And we grind meat fresh in the store multiple times a day. It's all in the bag. That's the best meat in town for the best folks in town. Ingalls, low prices, love the savings.
That is a very measured take, D-Money, because I'm thinking
Because
back.
he's 40. It's because he's old.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Exactly.
That's what it is. I'm thinking back to Clemson's loss in the 2015 Natty. Sorry, Mac.
Oh, awesome. Well, let's talk
Mac
about
was
that.
playing in that game. Wasn't his fault, though. And I remember being, and again, I was a student, all that stuff. I remember being upset because I kept thinking, will Clemson ever be back? And of course they were, and it ended up being storybook, but there was no guarantees. And in a weird way, it feels, even though the sport is crazy now, it feels like there's a few more guarantees because Miami has so much invested now. They've got the money. Obviously, they've got the coaching staff. It feels like they will be back. I know there's no guarantees, but does that help you? Like, feeling like this wasn't a one-off, that this program is built for success to continue?
Yeah, getting back to the game is even harder maybe than it was when Clemson did it, just because of the way this is all set up. I mean, Miami had to go to
True. That's a good point.
Field, had to beat Ohio State with 5 first-rounders, beat Ole Miss in a game that was stylistically tricky, and then just be in a position to get the ball on the last drive. So there was a lot of steps that had to happen, not to mention just getting out of the ACC and getting through the committee. I mean, it was a lot for Miami to get through there to get to this point. So to get to the championship, who knows? But I do think Miami is back in terms of they will be in that conversation, in that level of big-time football. And when you look at where college football is going, where it's changing so fast and people are just trying to keep up. The game is huge. Popularity is insane. You guys are getting great numbers on your videos. I feel like everybody is trying to talk college football these days because it's a hot topic. You see the ratings, and I think Miami is in that. Indiana had a lot to do with that great rating that Miami pulled, which was 8 million more, by the way, than the Ohio State Notre Dame the year before. but Miami did their part too. The game with Ohio State was the third highest ranked game of the season in terms of ratings. And then the day before, a couple days before, you had Saturday Night Live doing a Michael Irvin skit. I don't know if you guys saw that. So
Yeah,
it's
that was
like,
great.
and you saw the celebrities that were there. I mean,
Yeah.
between musicians, politicians, Michael Phelps was there walking around chilling with Ray Lewis, and no one even noticed him. It's like it was a big time feel, and I do think Miami to go to the championship game will be a journey. There's who knows when it's going to happen again, but being in that big time level, I do think Miami's arrived back there.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And just to kind of piggyback on how you said some things there and what KG brought up about, the investment that the university now has in not only athletics, but football specifically. I think I'm the most excited about and the most kind of impressed by. I was able to have lunch with your president, and man, just talking with him and his vision of what he's done, how he's done it, and what that vision is for not only but also for the football team and athletics. I was really impressed. How much do you feel like the administration and maybe specifically the president, getting on board with this whole thing and encouraging it, supporting it, pushing it instead of maybe shying away like years and years ago when the Canes had so much success?
Yeah, President Cheverria, very just unique guy. He's a Cane fan, grew up going to games. I'm sure you guys talked about that. I'm going to pick your brain about that lunch when we get off here. But he's a Canes fan. He's a competitive guy. He was CEO of Deloitte, which is a giant organization. So he's not an academic, very smart, but not academic background as far as coming from that university system. So he's an outsider in that way. And I think that helps for all of this. And nothing against academics. My wife is an academic at so I'm not trying to diminish that. But when you come from that business background, that cutthroat world, and now you're entering into this new age of college football, which is so much, new and so much competition and trying to see the future and anticipate things and be ahead of things. Having a guy like that, I think helps quite a bit. He's extremely competitive. He wants to win really, really badly. And he recognizes what does for the school. So I really think the two biggest things for Miami's marketing, it sounds crazy to say, is Instagram and the Canes football team.
Yeah,
Once
that's
Instagram
reality.
came out and people could see, Alex Earl, who's huge, it's just a Miami Hurricane grad influencer. When people could see the campus and see the lifestyle on Instagram, that was not there for us growing up. Now you see and you're like, okay, that seems like a cool place to go, even if I'm in, New Jersey or Chicago or whatever it is. So that's helped. And then of course now Miami football, when you have, the huddle or you have game and you have these huge events there on campus and people see it, they're like, wow, that's pretty awesome. And I think he recognizes that it's not just the pride of having a great football team, even though he's a fan, it's also marketing for the school. And like we were just talking about, college football is the second biggest sport in the country, hands down. That's been established even more so now. And when you see Miami kind of on top of that marquee, that's a good place to be as things start to change.
Correct. 33 million eyeballs. That's a lot of eyeballs on that game. Okay, let's look back at the season for a second, D-Money, because the fact that we're having this conversation now, after the Louisville loss, after the SMU loss, I would have been shocked. So if I had told you, and maybe it's more the SMU loss, because the Louisville loss, it felt like Louisville played really well. You had a chance to win. It was kind of a weird game, and it's just one loss, you can bounce back. But the SMU loss, where the offense did not look great, you lose there. If I had told you Miami's going to play for the national championship, what would D-Money have thought in that moment?
Yeah, I'll flip it on you, Kelly, because I think if you removed that stretch and you said, okay, Miami plays Notre Dame a certain way that they play them, the top 5 team at the time, and really I think overall one of the best teams. Florida State, USF, and you see kind of how Miami played those games, the style of play, the violence on defense, the impact of the edge rushers, the fact that they could run the ball when they needed to, Beck kind of managing the clock, Tony doing his thing. It wasn't that much different at all than what you saw in the playoff. It was the in-between that kind of got astray.
Yeah, I mean, we thought they were the number one team in the country. We had them as the number one team in the country. And then it just, that 3-game stretch, you're like, whoa, what's happening? This is not good. Code red.
And Notre Dame and Ohio State, again, to me, I think when Miami's, the crazy about the schedule, by the way, and the playoff run, I mean, Miami played the majority of the top 10. They were in the top 10, so that's one team. So there's really 9 teams left. They played Notre Dame, they played Ohio State, they played Texas A&M, they played Ole Miss, they played Indiana. So they played all these teams. I thought really talent-wise, the 2 best teams that Miami played were Notre Dame and Ohio State, from my opinion. And Miami won those games pretty similar way, really. So it was a shock that they were in that position after SMU, given what we had in our mind in the first couple weeks. But I think ultimately it's about getting back to what you were, as opposed to just changing your whole approach to get there.
Yeah. And we have talked about this, and the numbers had spoke for themselves until this year that Mario Cristobal had November issues. So, of course, the SMU game, now that's coming back up, right? The November scaries. What do you think was the biggest reason why November was different and then led to this run for Miami?
There were a lot of injuries. I know it's kind of a bailout kind of deal, but
No,
if you
that's
go
fair.
back to that SMU game, there was a lot of guys out, and they were out like right before the game, so there was a little bit of disruption there. Um, Miami plays a style where even when they're playing well, they're going to play some close games just because of the way they hold the ball and those kind of things. And then when you get penalties in that style and you're living down to down, you're trying to be positive on every single snap as opposed to explosive. You get some bad penalty games like you did against SMU, or a bad turnover day like you did against Louisville. You're going to be in trouble, and then you're going against a great offensive coordinator, which, I think this conference has some of the best offensive minds around. You had Braum for Louisville, Lashley for SMU. No matter how good your defense is, if it's the margin's that tight and they just got to get a couple first downs to win the game, or to put you in a really bad spot, or just execute a couple plays, they can dial something up. So I think that's really, with those two games in particular, it's hard to win playing Miami style they did this year when you turn the ball over 4 times and have 12 penalties. Probably hard to win any kind of style, but particularly that style.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And it's crazy. I just pulled up the schedule. Mark Fletcher had 18 rushing yards against Louisville, and that was the high for anybody else on the team. And I'm just like, I need to go back and watch that game. What the hell happened? What happened in that game? Go back and kind of see what the deal was there. Listen, it was a magical year, right? And it was really fun to watch. It was really fun to be a minuscule, part of that, and being able to cover this team and seeing it up close. And I just refer back to us at that practice, me, you, and Taylor Tannenbaum, and looking at this team, be like, I think there's something here. It looks pretty good, looks pretty physical, and how does it match up? And for them to go on the run that they did was really remarkable. I think what is fascinating, and I kind of want to change the page a little bit here, just because we have talked about these guys so much going to the championship game, is I don't think it's slowing down. There was maybe some question marks because of the quarterback. Well, that got answered with maybe the best quarterback in the country in Darian Mensah coming to town here. I have said this on other people's show. I'll say it on this show here. I think we're in for like a decade of dominance from Miami. I think that this new world, they're comfortable in it. The brand is happy. The money's good. We can pay people. And it's a destination place, like you said, and it's been built the inside out. You've got the monsters in the middle, and it's going to keep coming. These people who think, oh, Bain and Mesidor are gone. Bad news. There's some more dogs behind them that think that Maui Noah and Marquette. Bad news. There's another number 1 player in the country right behind them. It just feels like what they're doing, how they're doing it, is sustainable. And I think that's terrifying for everyone else. What's kind of your thoughts on the way ahead and as close as next year for Miami?
Just long-term decade of dominance. You hear that, you think about Miami in the 80s. That's what they always called that, the decade of dominance. I keep a very simple approach to these whole things about these extended runs. If you can keep recruiting elite defensive linemen every year, you will have sustained success. If it dries up for whatever reason, it becomes very difficult. The classic example I would use, Clemson, and you had some elite defensive linemen this year as far as a couple, but man, the defensive lines you had during that run were extraordinary. And then Alabama, the reason they were able to sustain it so long was because they always had those guys. It was one after another after another. Miami in the 80s, everybody focuses on the quarterbacks and the receivers and all that. Miami had by far the best defensive tackles in the country basically for 15 years. It was crazy what Miami was doing at defensive tackle. Once that stopped, the run stopped. So I think Miami's going to have to continue to replace that position, which is the most highly sought after position. It is the hardest to recruit. There's not that many of them. You got to win those battles constantly. But I do think you have a chance to do it. And certainly you alluded to it. You lose Bain, Mesidor, who are elite, both pass and setting the edge. but you do have a Marquise Lightfoot, who's a 5-star player who showed flashes. Armando Blunt, who played the whole season at 18 years old, was playing in these playoff games as 18 on the interior. He's a 5-star. Hayden Lowe, who was hurt this past year as a true freshman, but would have played a lot as a true freshman, another 5-star. Damon Wilson coming in from Missouri, who's a 5-star high school player and has produced at the college level as well. So far, so good in terms of that and kind of keeping that going. But it's a year-to-year process, man, because just like Miami wants those defensive linemen back, all those other big schools want their defensive linemen back. FSU, I mean, think about when FSU was running the show.
Mhm.
What did they have up front? Not only in the year they won the championship, but also the year where they did the year of the snub, right? The undefeated season. They had Jared Verse, they had Fisk. So I hope it's sustained. I think it can be because of the institutional buy-in that you're talking about. But ultimately, it's a year-to-year deal, and you have to win those battles in, February, March, April, June, the new recruiting calendar to keep it going. Because from one year to the next, if you're not good up front, you fall behind. It's that competitive, and the margins are that small.
Yeah, we know the big reason for Miami's success right now. You can talk about the quarterbacks and Malachi Toney's and all you want, but the lines of scrimmage are obviously the difference maker for them. All right, I have to ask you this, D-Money. I have to, because I was a little outspoken on our last episode, and we're talking about the future, and Darian Mensah is the new quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes. From what I know, being on our show and all these different things, great kid, and I think great fit at Miami. I think it's going to work really well. But overall, you talk about the popularity of this sport, how much the three of us love this sport. What are your thoughts on what this all means and how sustainable is this? The idea of, quarterbacks leaving the last day of the portal and signing a deal, but then reneging on it, all those things. Like what are your thoughts on that, D-Money, overall?
Rollback just dropped their licensed game day collection. Polos, hoodies, Q-zips, custom designed for your school. On game days, we wear Rollback, period.
Well, I wouldn't look back to like the old NCAA model. I would look more towards like the NFL, and this does not happen in the NFL. You don't have, Josh Allen leaving the Bills to go somewhere else on the last day of free agency when he's not a free agent, so that, I think that's more of the model you look to. You don't say the good old days, right? This wouldn't have happened in that model, that was unsustainable, at least legally, because we saw what happened once it was tested in court. The NCAA is on a pretty good losing streak in court. So I think that it's more about getting to the next step, which is professionalizing it, coming together on rules. Collective bargaining has become a much more viable discussion. I mean, you even heard Gabo talk, or sorry, Gabo. I thought I got Gabos on my brain with Malachi Toney. You even heard Dabo talking about players being employees after this whole situation he dealt with, which for him to say that, you guys know better than me, but that to me felt like a moment of a change. So it's just going to have to be more of an NFL model that preserves the college spirit. Obviously, you still have to go to class and all those sort of things to be sustainable. Otherwise, you're really dealing with no rules. And I think if the NCAA tries to install rules from the top down, just by gentleman's agreement, which I've heard that's happening a little bit, where you have certain schools saying, let's just agree to spend this amount, right, among gentlemen. I don't think that's
never going to work.
Yeah, great idea. Sure, we'll do that.
And D-Money, you're right. I am not trying to say we need to go back to 2004. Like, I am realistic, but I feel like there's got to be, and even for me, the people that I like to think about are the fans. I think it's tough for fans. Now, Miami fans are happy, sure, but it's tough for fans when your players can just kind of get swooped up at any moment. And I know it's a two-way street. Like, Mensah wanted to go to Miami. He's not being forced to go to Miami. I understand. But I'm just trying to think of the health of the sport overall.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. There's no rules. So there's nothing that succeeds in this world where there's no structure at all. It's just going to be more about what kind of structure is it? Is it going to be more like, hey, what the NFL is doing, or more about what the NCAA was doing 20 years ago? And I think, look, this being more centralized, I'm not sure that this is not exactly my world, although I'm learning more about it as I work more with these schools. I'm not sure the sport's making as much money as it should be making, considering that you're talking about 33 million people watching this thing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your lunch with Joe. They're not all like Joe. Joe was at Deloitte. This is a multinational monster of a company. A lot of these guys are, public health experts or science. And nothing wrong with, again, my wife is a scientist. I'm not diminishing that, but that's not the background to negotiate these giant multi-billion-dollar deals that college football is capable of doing, or finding ways to, look at today's signing day. Believe it or not, I don't know when this is going to air, but today's the original signing
I
day.
know.
And then you look at the draft with Goodell, where it's like Woodstock. He's got 3 days of people with, hundreds of thousands of people to watch the draft, which used to be the dorkiest thing in the world when I watched it as a kid.
Right.
Can college football have something like that for signing day that's a little more exciting? It's hard to do when you have different conferences kind of doing their own thing. But if you had a visionary type of person or group at the front that this is what they do, get you guys hosting. That'd be cool. Hosting like a signing day thing, which is actual content and you could sell. So, we're getting way off track. I love this stuff, so I apologize for hijacking it. But I just think what the NFL is doing, that's what we got to aspire to as college, while still keeping the spirit of college. Because at the end of the day, I like the college a lot better than the NFL, just like you guys like college a lot better than the NFL. But at the same time, you recognize they make a lot of money. They see the trains run on time with that organization, and you got to try to figure out some of the things they're doing going forward.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing of everything you just said there is when and how do we start the college football draft? That's what we need to get going. I don't know how you do it, but we can figure that out. One thing, just as you were talking there and we were rattling about defensive alignment, it did make me think about Coach Heatherman. I think it would be silly not to address that before we fully just flip the page. That's my bad for getting too excited there. He was amazing. The turnaround, the intensity, obviously, just how he did this. And, he if you probably asked him, he'd probably say, I've got monsters everywhere. It's not hard. It's not, neuroscience. It's not rocket science. But he did it. And he was able to make a dramatic turnaround where this was one of the nastiest, if not the nastiest defense in all of college football. What was that like from your perspective? What did you see? What did you hear? How was he able to do it? And again, kind of similar thing with the sustainability. Is that something you perceive to continue as the years go on?
It's funny. You guys have been involved in high-level athletics as players. I never got to that high level. So I assume these coaches, meetings, and it's like a science lab with the X's and O's and all that. The more I learn about it, the more I'm amazed by when you get to it, when you talk to a true defensive mind, how much they say, man, I want to make sure when you turn on the tape, it looks like our guys are playing hard. They're running to the ball. It's not even about the X's and O's. And obviously that's a part of it, but it's so much of what these defensive coordinators talk about when you really talk to them, at least my experience is, do they run hard to the ball? Do they line up the right way? Is their alignment right? Are they running to the ball? Are they swarming? Stuff like that. And I think that's the biggest thing, more so than any X's and O's adjustment. And there's been some of that, but the fact that he has these guys playing with such a violent temperament, that you have big guys running to the ball. By the way, on the offensive side, you have little guys blocking, right? So all those things like that you see across the team, but certainly on defense, the way the defensive tackles are cleaning these plays up, that's a culture thing. He sets that tone. He's constantly teaching swarming. And then just in terms of the actual mechanics of it, he really boiled it down to simplifying the alignment, not having so much movement up front in a way that takes away some of that natural aggression and ability to just, hey, I'm lining up here, let me beat my guy, which you saw a ton of this year with Ruben Bain and all these other guys. And that's allowed them to really hone in too on technique. Because if you're not so much worried about what you're doing on a certain play, you can focus on your own personal technique. And I think you've seen that particularly with the defensive line coaches, Damian Lewis, Jason Taylor, 2 very good professional players, JT, a Hall of Famer, Damian Lewis, a longtime pro, top 10 pick. The defensive tackles and defensive ends had an excellent technique. And I think that is something that Heatherman really fostered. And his position coaches obviously did a great job, but he made it as simple as possible. Line up, this is where you're lining up, make sure your alignment's right, play hard, and then really hone in on your technique.
I think we have to mention Baby Jesus before we get out of here. And Malachi Tony, as a local legend in high school, I think there were high expectations, obviously, the nickname, but I don't know if we all expected what we saw from him. So is there a moment you think back oh, okay, this guy's different. And then what do you think is the next step for Malachi Tony?
You knew he was going to contribute in spring. The spring game, he was great, but you didn't have Beck. So he was playing a lot with the second team. So you said this guy's going to be a good player. We just lost Restrepo. He's kind of in that mold, right? He's going to find space. He's going to be high IQ. He's going to do that. And you heard things around the building that were great with him. So that was all positive momentum in spring. But then when Beck started throwing to these guys, and Beck consistently looked to Tony as his bailout option and was throwing into crowds with Tony as the target, as a undersized freshman, true freshman, you start realizing, okay, the level of trust here is different. And I think that was a big moment for me. Probably one of the practices we were at, talking to with Mac and Taylor and Taylor's cousin, even Taylor's cousin, you about
He's the one that
baby
told
Jesus.
us. He's the one that let us all know.
So at that point, when Beck really started honing in on him, you saw it. I think the real underrated thing with Tony, the more I go back and watch some of his plays, and I get it with my kids because, my kids, I'm trying to get them to pick up their knees. So I'm trying to get them to run up a hill, right? We have a hill by our house. You got to run the hill. And they're like, oh, all right, whatever. When you watch Malachi Tony, his leg strength and ability to push through on some of these long touchdowns that he's had is incredible. And I think he was always a tough kid, but that strength was all him from when he signed to when the season started, just going insane in the weight room. So that's like something that you don't talk about as much with him, but I think you don't put him on a track, and he's not going to be running a 100-meter past a lot of these guys in the ACC, the faster receivers. That's not him. But football-wise and just working his body into the ultimate machine, and then obviously mentally he's elite, I think that's what the Tony story is, more so than just God-given ability.
Yeah, he he has such a good feel for the option route and for space, and that's hard to do, especially as a young player. So I can only imagine, what that final form is and what he's going to look like, when he ultimately is a full-grown, full-grown adult. And maybe, this is as good as it gets, which is really freaking good. One of the best, players in the country. Let me ask you this. I just kind of thought about this, and it's not to stir drama, but it is interesting. Marion Mensah's coming in, and he has his guy, and his guy's coming too. Who that was the bailout guy, right? Like, he's going to Cooper no matter what. And I don't know. Do you think there's any weirdness there? Do you think there's any rub? Do you think there's
Ask
any
it,
force
Mac.
feeding? Well, I'm trying to say it. I mean, I know from
That's
the
an interesting point.
from the
Yeah,
football
because that's his
perspective what
guy.
it's like. But yeah,
That's almost his Restrepo.
yeah.
Like,
What do you think?
yeah.
I mean, what do you think there? Has anybody talked about that? Have you heard anything about that? And just what that relationship might be like?
No, they're tight. They're both from California, meaning Barkate and Mensah. You see it on tape, just like you said, the trust. I mean, Mensah's throwing to a spot with Barkate. I mean, these are not like wide open throws that he's throwing to Barkate. The level of trust between Mensah and Barkate is huge. Over the middle, right? Not worried about anything. Just, hey, he's going to be in the right place. He's going to catch it, which, again, you see the same thing with Beck and Tony. I will say when they had their visit at Prime 112, which, I mean, did you go to Prime 112 when you were not? We were there. We went together.
You paid
We
for
were
everything.
together.
I
That's where we
appreciate
went.
it.
Oh, do you
Brother.
mind paid? Okay.
Yeah, so we were there, and the kind of scene it is. But anyways, that was Mensah where he came on his visit. It was him, Barkate, and Tony. Tony was the guy that was there. So clearly they're trying to foster that. I would say the thing that's going to help that, Mac, is Barkate is an outside receiver, really. So he can play the slot, I guess, but it's not really where he does most of his damage. So I think that makes it a little different. And then also Tony, you're trying to manufacture his touches a little bit in terms of like the stuff he does, the wildcat and the throwing. I think that's all going to continue to be the stretch plays that he runs. You're going to see that a lot of that too, which is not really how Barkate operates. So I'm more concerned, not so much those two. Miami brought in two really, really good receivers from the portal that no one's talking about, which is Cam Vaughn, who was a quarterback in small town in Georgia, goes to Jacksonville State, was Rich Rod's best receiver. Rich Rod took him to West Virginia. He was the best receiver at West Virginia as a true sophomore, but West Virginia didn't really throw the ball that well. He comes in the portal before we even had Mensah or Barkate or any of that. He looks a lot like CJ Daniels, maybe with a little more speed, more of that true kind of X split end kind of guy. And Vondrevious Jacobs, Vero Beach kid who went to South Carolina. Do you remember the Clemson game against South Carolina? The guy that went over the top.
Catch, yeah.
I mean, big time deep threat. I think he averaged over 17 yards a carry. South Carolina people were really not happy to lose him. He was a good character guy, like a captain type of guy.
We're happy about it.
Well, he comes to Miami to give us a deep threat that really I thought was one of the biggest weaknesses of last year's team. You didn't just have, if they bracketed Tony, the deep threat, the ability for Beck. People blame Beck a lot for the lack of the deep throw in Miami's arsenal. I think a lot of it had to do with the receiving core, just that's not being their thing. He does that. So that's really 4 guys that you got to feed on top of some very talented freshmen. Josh Moore played in the championship as a true freshman.
Yeah.
Dalen Upshaw was hurt, but he was starting to play more. You bring in some very highly touted freshmen, including a elite receiver from Barcade's hometown in Vance Spafford, who was they know each other. So you have that kind of dynamic going on. And this is a guy that Spafford runs a 4.3. He was one of the top receivers in the country, committed to Georgia. Miami flipped him, and him and Barcade have a relationship. So there's a lot of dynamics in that room. You also are, as you know, Matt, because you watched the show this morning, we're a little lacking in tight end. So maybe we go back to the air raid origins of Shannon Dawson, and you're not throwing so many tight ends on the field in terms of guys, trying to get those really strong edges with these guys blocking, and maybe just go classic air raid and as many receivers on the field as possible. Mensah is a distributor. He threw for 3,900 yards last year. I think Cam Ward threw for 4,200 the year before. Maybe you get in that range with Mensah, and all these guys are happy. But it's going to be
Tony can block just as well as a tight end anyway. So just let him eat.
D-Money, so sorry for all these issues that Miami has to deal with. How do we get all these guys the ball?
Yeah, how many footballs are you going to have on the field at once, buddy? That's the question. We didn't even talk running back. Base
feels so bad for you.
But
okay.
You're joking, but you guys
They're
know
loaded.
It's hard to deal with success. Now, they didn't win the championship, so there's that hunger. You bring in Fletcher, Fletcher's back, Tony's back. There's going to be some of that leadership and hunger there. They're not going to let the urgency slip, but that is a problem. And we joke about it, but it is these things do become a problem if you let it. So that's going to be a challenge for Miami.
I mean, everybody knew that coming in, and they still transferred in, and they still stayed. So that to me is that's culture. That's when you start really cooking at a high level. And again, KG, that's why I think this thing ain't slowing down anytime soon.
So that's my last question, is about Cristobal, because we've talked about him, his work ethic, his kind of origin story, why he is the way he is. And in some ways, like if Miami had won, it feels like Cristobal wouldn't change. I get that. But his whole mantra and philosophy of you got to work hard every single day and just bring it every single day and never let up, right? This almost adds to it in some ways. So where is Mario Cristobal mentally, and what do you think expectations are for next season, at least for you and for the fan base?
I mean, I heard he was pretty depressed and focused on recruiting. I mean, exactly what you'd expect, right? I mean, the Mensah thing happened right after.
Yeah.
Right, as far as like his visit.
Nice consolation prize getting Mensah right after that.
But I mean, it's nonstop. I mean, you think about it. You go from, let's say SMU, which you talked about, Kelly, earlier. You go from SMU, so now you got a single elimination tournament to get through, because if you lose any game or play any game closer than it should be the rest of the year, you're out. So you got to be perfect the rest of the way. Then you got Selection Sunday, which was a crazy day. We did all the shows about that. Then you go to Kyle Field. You play Ohio State, most talented team in the country. Ole Miss to go to the championship. Then you play in the championship. And then you're doing the portal stuff right in the middle of that. And then when you finish the championship game, you're in the courtroom. You're trying to settle a court case. You're not trying to settle it. Miami's not, because they're not involved in the case directly. But it's obviously, if that doesn't go your way and for whatever reason Mensah doesn't come, the portal's closed. He had no quarterback. So it's like, I'm sure he was so occupied with all this stuff going on that he's just his head spinning. But I think right now it's about, he's talked about what I just mentioned earlier, which is complacency. That's the number one lesson he took from Saban. And obviously they won every single year. So they put into practice is, how do you avoid complacency? How do you avoid bringing in guys that are kind of like, well, I'm here for the ride. You guys are on top. I'll be on top too. I'm just going to put on the helmet and it's going to happen naturally. How do you avoid that and keep the hunger? So I'm sure that is, he said it before the championship. He goes, that's the number one job I have every day when I wake up in the morning, is fighting complacency. The second thing he does in the morning is text 1 million recruits at 5 a.m. So I think that's pretty much what you're going to be seeing the rest of the summer, is trying to make sure this team keeps that edge and then texting 1 million recruits. But I do think when you bring back a Mark Fletcher, and you bring back a Malachi Tony, and you bring back Ahmad Moten and some of these guys that could have gone pro, not Tony, but certainly Malachi and Moten, or sorry, Mark Fletcher and Moten, they're going to, hopefully they will have the message that Mario wants to deliver, and it's always going to be better coming from guys like that than the head coach.
No doubt, man. It's going to be special. Hey, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for your time. This was a super fun episode, and I think we're going to see a lot more of this come next year. I think the
I think
Canes are
so.
loaded. So we'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun. Great seeing you, brother.
You guys are the best. You got to keep the Canes episodes coming because I know you got a lot of Canes subscribers. I know you
They're
got a lot of
locked in.
Canes viewers, so we got to
They're
keep it
locked in.
coming.